Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajagacharya Stoutarasta Srishimadhava Charanarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Shilapopad Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Golokananda Bhagwan Ki Jai Sri Sri Krishna Balaram Ji Ki Jai Shri Sinitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo Krantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaiham Dadati Sapatantikam Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desha Tarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Sri Srinita Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So where did we stop? If anyone can remind me, I didn't put a note. As usual, I should put a note, but Shadika Prabhu, you can tell me where we stopped.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Last we stopped at 3.4.14. 3.4.14.
Okay. Oh, yes. Overmamudava glorified and prayed to the Lord. Hare Krishna. All right. So anyone there? We can start the class. We already 10 minutes. So in this section, overwhelmed Uddhava glorified and prayed to the Lord. Uddhava to the Lord. So Uddhava to Vidura, he said, I was overwhelmed by the Lord's reciprocation. My words failed in tears, and my hairs erupted, smearing my eyes, sparing my tears with folded hands, I spoke. So here, Uddhava is narrating to Vidura about his personal situation. Okay, Uddhava is narrating his very interesting encounter with the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, to Vidura, and he is saying the following verse, which is text 15. Okay. Let me read text 14 so we know. O Vidura, when I was thus favored by every moment by the Supreme Lord and addressed by him with great affection, my words failed in tears and hairs on my body erupted. After sparing my tears, I, with folded hands, spoke like this. So Uddhava is narrating the situation of his encounter with the Supreme Lord at this place called Prabhasha. Krishna is sitting with his back to a young banyan tree, his right leg folded based on his left thigh, and he's showing his Chaturbhuj Vaikuntanath form. And he spoke with great affection to Uddhava, and Uddhava is remembering and narrating these beautiful pastimes of his encounter previously with the Lord Sri Krishna. And then he erupted in tears and he's saying at that time. And what did Uddhava said to the Lord at that time is verbatim, or so to speak, in text 15. Konna ishate padasaro jabhajam sudurlabhoriteshu chatushva piha tatapi naham pravinommi bhunam bhavat padambojani nishevanutsukaha. O my Lord, devotees who engage in the transcendental loving service of your lotus feet have no difficulty in achieving anything within the realm of the four principles of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Right? So anyone is engaged in the loving service of the Lord, they get all the material benefits that the Lord seems fit or deem right for them to get. That is up to the Lord, what he wants to give to his devotee, because he's mostly concerned with the spiritual advancement. Then, but oh great one, as far as I'm concerned, I have preferred only to engage in the service of your lotus feet. So he had said that to the Supreme Lord, that he only were interested in pure devotional service to the lotus feet, and he was not interested in anything to do with economic development, artha, sense gratification, kama, and moksha, or even principles of religiosity, dharma. Right? This is where we had stopped last time, right? Okay. So those who are associated with the Lord in the Vaikuntha planets achieve all the bodily features of the Lord and appear to be the same as Lord Vishnu. What is this called? This is called Swarupya Mukti. Such liberation is called Swarupya Mukti, which is one of the 5 kinds of liberation. The devotees engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord never accept the Sayuja Mukti, or merging in the rays of the Brahmajyoti. The devotees can achieve not only liberation, but any success on the path of religiosity. So this we have already studied. Am I right? We're starting with this verse here, not Shalika Prabhu?
You're actually, my bookmark shows 13. We stopped at 13.
Yes. Okay. So we already discussed 13. 14 we discussed. 14 and 15. We discussed 14. That's good. So text 16. My Lord, even the learned sages become disturbed in the intelligence when they see that your greatness engages in fruitive work, although you are free from all desires. That you take birth, although you are unborn. That you flee out of fear of the enemy and take shelter in a fort, although you're the controller of invisible time. And that you enjoy household life around. We've done that.
I'm not sure. Probably I lost count, but my bookmark was showing 13. So
13, 1 free.
Yeah, that was where my bookmark said we stopped. Okay. So we're supposed to start at 14.
All right.
You started at 14, which I think is all right.
Yes, fine. So the principles of repetitive nature here, we've already understood that the Lord, he is engaged in work, but he's not bound by the work. The Lord actually appears to be born, but he's unborn. And sometimes the Lord, he may show a pastime where he's fleeing from the enemy as Ranchor, right? But that's actually not his true nature. Because he's a controller of invisible time. Why does it say here controller of invisible time? Because invisible time is actually what causes fear and death and destruction of everything. But nothing like that fear, death, or destruction can actually overcome the Lord. And therefore, because he is invisible time, right? So you enjoy household life surrounded by many women, although you enjoy it yourself. Lord Sri Krishna is Atmarama, right? He enjoys within. He doesn't need anyone from outside to enjoy. But he does enjoy rasa, relationship. But that is a manifestation of his own internal potency which he enjoys. So, so we will read text 17. Mantre sumamba upahuyavattam akuntita kanda sadatma bodha priche prabho mugdaiva pramathas tanno mano mohayattiva deva. Oh my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time. There's no limitation in your perfect knowledge. So the Supreme Lord, even though he appears in so many forms, it's not that it is divided by the influence of time. He appears by his own sweet will. Ajopi sannavayatma bhutanam ishwaropi san. Yeah, that chapter 4, text 6 in the Gita. And there is no limitation to his perfect knowledge. Krishna is minutely knowledgeable about everything that goes on at all times. When I'm saying minutely, in minutiae, in the most smallest aspect of everything in this universe, what is going on in the smallest atom, what is going on in the largest universe, he is actually clearly in knowledge of that. So you are never bewildered. And then he says, you are sufficiently able to concentrate in yourself because he's the source of all knowledge. Chit Sakti. So therefore, Krishna is always aware of everything. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what's going on. But then Uddhava is remembering how he used to call upon Uddhava for consultation. And Krishna acting like he's bewildered. Although you are never bewildered. And this act of yours bewilders me. So it says very interesting composition. He says, you're never bewildered, but you act bewildered. But this act of yours bewilders me because Krishna is actually completely swarat, independent. He can do everything by himself. And he's a Vigyan. He's fully cognizant. These are the two words that comes in the first canto, first chapter, first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So of course, he would call Uddhava for consultation as if requiring his advice and his opinion. But that is just to show that the Supreme Lord wanting to develop relationship with everyone. Okay, so text 18. Jnanam param swatvaraha prakasham pravachakasmai bhagavan samagram apikshamam no grahanaya bharta sadajasayad virjanang tarema. My Lord, kindly explain to us if you think us competent to receive it. That transcendental knowledge, which gives enlightenment about yourself and which you expand before to Brahmaji. So he's saying, he said to the Lord, he said, kindly explain to us if you think us competent to receive this knowledge, that knowledge which gives enlightenment about yourself. So this vidya, this knowledge that actually gives enlightenment about the Supreme Lord, is the knowledge that is required for us to go back home, back to Godhead. And without that knowledge that who is the Supreme Lord, we cannot go back to him. So someone will say, but Prabhu, do we need knowledge or we need bhakti? But the bhakti will generate that knowledge. That bhakti, that devotion to the Supreme Lord will generate that knowledge. And the knowledge will help us to get that proper advancement in bhakti. So yes, knowledge is required to know the Supreme Lord. If you don't know the Supreme Lord, we may be worshipping him, we may be admiring him, we may be glorifying him, we may be rendering him service, but in a way that may not be conducive to actually understand him. Krishna is a person. He has a mind, he has an intelligence, there are things he likes. We have to know him, and he's a supremely knowledgeable person. So to know Krishna is not so easy. To serve Krishna is not so easy. So we have to really understand. So this process of parampara means that is handed down, this knowledge. Even Lord Brahma, he could not actually fully understand the Vedas if it wasn't explained to him by the Supreme Lord. And that knowledge of the Vedas is the knowledge that actually allows us to know Krishna. Vedascha sarver aham eva vidya vedanta krit veda vidyavachaham. The aim of the Vedas is to know him. He is a compiler of the Vedas, and he's a knower of the Vedas. So because he's a knower of the Vedas, he's a compiler of the Vedas, he gives this knowledge of the Vedas to Brahma. Even Brahma, with his four heads, the most supremely intelligent person who creates the universe or fills up the universe by secondary creation, he cannot know Krishna unless Krishna teaches him. So this process of hearing and understanding from Guru is because originally we have both Vidya and Avidya in our heart. Vidya avidya yuktasya. Anadi avidya avidya yuktasya. So both there is avidya from time immemorial. Anadi. And also we have Vidya. What avidya? We have forgotten our relationship with the Supreme Lord. And what Vidya we have? Knowledge that we are conscious and we are different from the body and the soul that can be expanded. That is explained in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, but that transcendental knowledge which gives enlightenment about yourself and which you explained before to Brahmaji, that is the knowledge of the Vedic literatures, the essence of the knowledge. Very deep statement. So without that knowledge, how could Brahmaji would have been enlightened? And how could we be enlightened without that knowledge? So we should finally end our life understanding the essence of the Vedas, which is Vedanta. Very important point. So a pure devotee like Uddhava has no material afflictions because he engages constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Because he's a transcendental personality. He's in transcendental service. So he has no material afflictions. Brahma Bhuta Prashanatma. He's Prashanatma. He's a satisfied soul. He's a happy soul. No shochati, no kankshati. He has no lamentation, no grief. And he has no hankering. But then why is he crying here? Why is he filled with tears? Can anyone answer that question? Could you please try to answer?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Shalika Prabhu.
Why the Lord seems to be scared?
Huh?
I want to understand the question you are asking.
My question is, it is said here that the pure devotee like Uddhava has no material affliction because he engages constantly in transcendental loving service of the Lord. Right? But he's afflicted, no? He's crying and he's relating his remembrance of the Supreme Lord and how he talked to the Supreme Lord. And in there, he is completely shaken up. So why is that?
Okay, let me try to speculate a little bit. Just like in material life, the experience or the birth of material conditioning puts us in fear. On the spiritual platform also, when one gets to the highest level of bhakti, the fear of losing the Lord also manifests. And that comes in kind of an ecstasy. And then feeling that feeling of emotion, so manifest in various forms, in anger, in shedding tears and all of that.
Yes, but one thing is, whenever Prabhupada says something like that, he always explains it. And it's right there in the purport. So he says, a pure devotee like Uddhava has no material affection because he engages constantly in the transcendental service of the Lord. And then he carries on. A devotee afflicted without the association of the Lord, constant remembrance of Lord activities keeps the devotee alive. So he's afflicted because he's a pure devotee. He's afflicted because of his bhava of separation. This is vipralambaras. This is how constantly Gorkishore Das Babaji was in that mood. Namo Gaura Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye. He was an embodiment of detachment. So we offer our obeisances to Gorkishore Das Babaji. Namo Gaura Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye, his embodiment of renunciation. Vipralamba Rasham Bodhe Padangujayate Namaha. He was always feeling constant separation of the Supreme Lord. So he felt like he was afflicted, but he wasn't. That was his bhava, his spiritual emotions of separation of the Lord. So that is nothing to do with material affliction.
Yeah.
So a pure devotee like Uddhava has no material affliction. So we have to understand that. And therefore, Uddhava requested that the Lord please enlighten him with the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam as previously instructed to Brahmaji. And how did he instruct this knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam to Brahmaji? It was a Chatushloki Bhagavatam. Okay, I think we have done these verses. Someone's misguided me.
I think because you're meditating on this section, so you're thinking that you've said it to us. Maybe you've been thinking about it.
I'm glad if I'm meditating. All right, so so 19.
But Prabhu, before we go too further, I asked some two questions. Text number 15. When I was reading that verse, so many thoughts was coming to my mind. And there are two questions actually, 15 and 17. And in the text number 15, it says that, "Oh my Lord, devotees who engage in the transcendental loving service of your lotus feet have no difficulty in achieving anything within the realm of the four principles of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. But, O great one, as far as I'm concerned, I have preferred only to engage in the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Uddhava is expressing here, this is the mood of the pure devotees. Uddhava also, Dhruva Maharaj also expresses when he asks darshan of the Lord. And so the pure devotees are like this. So sometimes someone actually asks a question sometimes, which is actually probably maybe, and I try to answer the question. So maybe that's why that as long as a pure devotee is still in this material world, and I would like to use Prabhupada's example that because sometimes some devotees feel that accepting the path of bhakti means accepting impoverishedness, difficulties, and all kinds of things that you can think of. And then there's this famous verse, I can't remember it off heart, that if you're still attracted to material desires and sense gratification, you should not go to see that personality who is standing by the river bank of Yamuna, Krishna. I can't remember the Sanskrit of that verse. So like you said that. So sometimes devotees have this notion that when you take to the path of bhakti, you accept kind of a mood of poverty. And sometimes they even say, even in the early days, they will say that if you become a Brahmana, you accept the vow of poverty, impoverishedness. So here, this verse is saying that a devotee has no difficulty in all of these things, even though he's not desiring, the Lord gives to him. And that's why I said I wanted to use Prabhupada to round up this question. That Srila Prabhupada, with the beginning of Srila Prabhupada's activities, Prabhupada was externally showing a kind of difficulties. We see so many difficulties Prabhupada had to go through. But when Prabhupada started his mission in 1966, and all of a sudden, so much opulence, so many things came to Prabhupada. So my question now is this, that does it mean that until one comes to the platform of a bhakti, pure bhakti, Krishna intentionally denies that person comfort in the material existence?
This is not one solution fits all.
Okay.
Because to Dhruva Maharaj, he gave him so much glory, name, fame, profit, Lakshmi, and everything.
But that was
and because he was a Artharthi Bhakta. He went to the Supreme Lord specifically for want of the highest material benediction. So he was and in the text 16 of chapter 7, Prabhupada talks about Dhruva Maharaj as a Artharthi Bhakta. So then also a pure devotee, he became pure in his mind when he met Lord Vishnu, gave him darshan. But initially he wanted to get a benediction. So he was not on the highest platform. He didn't approach from the for Uttama Bhakti. So we cannot say, because there's as many varieties of devotees as there are nuances of our desires within our approach to Krishna consciousness. And everyone can, even a pure devotee, he may have one thing that he still wants, a particular, and to come to the platform where everything is completely for the satisfaction of Krishna, like Prahlad Maharaj, it's a very high and tall order. So we cannot say one, and you see the pastimes of so many devotees in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not, a blanket statement, one fits all. Now, on the other side, what it says here is for a devotee to acquire means that if he wants, if he's approached Krishna, just like Dhruva Maharaj, there's no limit to what Krishna can give him. But if he wants Uttama Bhakti, wants pure devotional service, then there won't be then you won't get a situation where he's being pushed in that direction.
Prabhu,
So
I'm meeting you. You are on it again. There's a sound behind you, please. Tamara Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I've muted you again. Please don't come up for now.
Yes, please. Yeah. So okay. So then the pure devotee, he can get the blessings he wants, just like Dhruva Maharaj. And there's so many others, great personalities who approach Krishna. But he is interested in only pure devotional service. So he did not want, even though Krishna is able to give every single benediction he wants. That was chapter 15. So not every devotee approaches. Some devotee may approach. My personal understanding is if you have to approach anyone for anything and you are in want of something, and it's not like devotees don't, devotees do. I'd suggest, as following in the path of Dhruva Maharaj, is to ask Krishna if you want something. It is not the best, but because people do, and we preach pure devotional service, we cannot always say, no, you should not. Okay. We are teaching and learning about pure devotional service. My angle is better to ask Krishna than to go somewhere else. You would not be happy if your son and your daughter goes to your neighbor and ask for something where they need it at home. You'd be more pleased that they ask you directly. It would offend you. You wanted something, why did you go and ask someone else? Better if you don't, because the Father is going to provide anything anyway. They have love. It's the same with Krishna. If something is required, he will fulfill. My situation is a little bit like this. I mean, I've lived my life. I was in a very simple form, laborer class family. And at the age of 17, I was quite proficient in education, and I started giving tuition and this and that, and I earned money. From the age of 17 till now, I always had some Lakshmi in my pocket. I didn't have any problem. But now I have abandoned everything, and I have what I have, but I don't have money. I don't have any income. And I don't worry about it. Krishna will provide if he wants to provide. If he doesn't want to provide, that's fine with me. I will not die for want of food and shelter. So it's the best way to live. Then you can try to depend on Krishna. And every day Krishna makes some arrangement for me. So he's a maintainer. And I got really convinced, understanding and reading and teaching Srimad Bhagavatam or studying Srimad Bhagavatam with my seniors, that he has a special scheme, asthanam, and he will maintain. But a devotee does not feel the need to ask. But when we are in the initial stages of devotional service and we're struggling, then we say to Krishna, please give us these things. But that's okay, because as we grow, we will understand that Krishna will do whatever is required for his devotee. But for Uddhava, being on the highest rung of devotional service, he did not feel. He could have asked, he could have got, but he said, I didn't want. Why? Because he was living in Dwarka with Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna had so much opulence. And the story of Sudama Brahman, his wife wanted, but he hesitated to ask. But because the desire was in his heart, then Krishna blessed him. It was the same thing. So can we carry on?
Yes, Prabhu, just two questions. Thank you for this question. The other question is text number 17. Oh my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time, and there is no limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus, you are sufficiently able to consult with yourself. Yet, you called upon me for consultation as if bewildered, although you are never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. You explained this point, and it's also bringing my mind to, I like the way you explained that aspect, how Bhakti and knowledge kind of complement each other. If we need knowledge to know, to serve Krishna, but Bhakti will give us knowledge. But my last question is that in the beginning of, in the preliminary stage of Bhakti, when we're still in the Sadhaka level, we're trying to become a devotee. Sometimes we say that there is this statement that we are what we know. Yes, this is true, but at this present stage, we don't know Krishna. We don't have the knowledge of him. And we don't have Bhakti also. We don't also have Bhakti. So the spiritual master requests instructors that just chant the holy name. By the chanting of the holy name, which is the process of Bhakti, you get knowledge, you get help that is required. But then, because also we are impure, we are still in the condition like we find it difficult, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, unable to chant the holy name also. So in that state of consciousness, in that state of situation, in the stage of devotion and service, what is the best advice for such a devotee who is in that situation? I hope my question is clear.
We know Krishna, at least in theory, he's the Supreme Lord, and we accept that, and we follow the path of sadhana bhakti, which we are doing. But up to the point of nishtha, devotional service is anything but easiness. There's no easiness up to the point of nishtha. Everything is tough. People say devotional service is easy. No, it's not easy. Not easy up to the point of nishtha. You really have to struggle because you have to convince your mind to not be a rascal. You have to permanently use your intelligence, and you have to permanently search for answers for the grunges, for the negative things in our heart. So it's not easy. And what helps is the knowledge. Because what will actually convince the mind is the jnana. What will convince the mind is actually the intelligence, and intelligence will be equipped with knowledge. Without knowledge, what intelligence will we use? So it's an executive power of intelligence, but the source, the resources is the knowledge. So how do we get that knowledge? There's two sides of that knowledge. Is as jnanam vijnanam sahitam brahmaka. You know, jnanam and vijnanam astikyam. Brahma karma svabhavacham. So both jnana and vijnana. Vijnana means realized knowledge, and jnana means theoretical knowledge. So we need both. So some knowledge, Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and we need to practice the process of bhakti. That knowledge is the knowledge of sadhan, of Vaidhi bhakti. And who is the Supreme Lord? Realization of that is vijnana, and that comes slowly, slowly. So it's not that we don't have total absolute knowledge of the Lord. That is practically impossible. But we have some knowledge of the Lord, and we're worshipping him according to Vaidhi, regulative practice, sadhana bhakti. Now, that extra knowledge of Krishna is generated by bhakti. That is explained. Right? Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. Jnana Atiya Suvairagyam. The two byproducts of devotional service is jnana and vairagya. That will come. That will come. That is knowledge of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from the material world will come as a result. That is second, divinity, divine service. I think text 13 or whatever. So that is explained. So it's not that we don't have. We may not have as advanced knowledge of the Supreme Lord as is required, but we have some knowledge. We know he's a Supreme Personality of Godhead. We know certain qualities and characteristics of him. And we know that his name will remove all the negative things from our life. So we do. We do. But we don't have the knowledge, enough knowledge, like Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam. My birth and activities are transcendental. We know that. Inverted commas, we know. But what is the nature of his activities and birth? We know. But in detail, he says, Janma karma chame divyam evang yaveti taktata. We need to know them in truth. And when we know them in truth, then he says, we will not come back to this world. So though we need to love and know Krishna. And when we know him, we will love him. And that is the process of Vaidhi Bhakti. And up to the point of Nishtha, it's always a struggle. So knowledge is important. Knowledge is very important. That's why it is that with this knowledge that we know who is the Supreme Lord. We can be actually worshipping Krishna without knowing also, but ultimately we get to know him. How are we going to go to serve him if we don't know him? Let's take one simple example. Prabhupada came to Mauritius for 5 days, 5 days. And when I asked some of the senior devotees, how was it to serve Prabhupada? He said, we couldn't cope more. If he had stayed a few more days, I don't know how we would have coped. It was practically impossible to properly serve him. So now, if it is so difficult to even think of serving Srila Prabhupada for 5 days, if you're not accustomed to it, and you're not trained, and you're not gone through the fire of being under his presence, right? New devotees would shake and fall apart in his service. Right? Probably you all have the same experience with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So we multiply that by how many millions when it comes to Krishna? Right? So that's how we have to look at it. That it is required to know him. And that is a principle of Jnana. Even when Krishna spoke and he said in this verse that Krishna has actually given the knowledge to Brahma. And that same knowledge you've given to me, he was preparing to give to Uddhava. Uddhava is saying like that. But even then, Brahma was bewildered at times. But without the knowledge, how do we navigate in this darkness of ignorance? That's why the spiritual master, he gives you this knowledge to open your darkened eyes. What does he give? The knowledge about who is the Supreme Lord. So that's the whole process. We're on the right path. And we have to know that we're on the right path and we have to be positive. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. It does. It does. Thank you.
Yeah. So which verse now are we reading? 18?
19.
Huh?
19.
19, yeah. So he says, Iti yavedita hardhaya mahayam sa bhagavan para adideshara vindaksha atmana paramam stitim. Thus, when I thus expressed my heartful desires unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the lotus-eyed Lord instructed me about his transcendental situation. The words paramam stitim are significant in this verse. The Lord's transcendental situation was not even spoken of to Brahma, when the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam were explained. The transcendental situation comprises his dealings with devotees engaged in transcendental loving service as exhibited in Dwarka and Vrindavan. So the 4 nutshell verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam explains about his transcendental nature, that his transcendental detailed activities was not even spoken to Brahma. That's why when Brahma later on It's a very deep statement, this. Later on, when he saw Krishna as a cowherd boy playing with cows and calves, he was bewildered, because that transcendental situation of his dealings with his devotees in his Vrindavan and Braj Leela were not exhibited and explained to Brahma. So when the Lord explained his specific transcendental situation, it was meant for Uddhava only. And therefore Uddhava particularly said, Mahyam, unto me. It was spoken unto him. So his personal transcendental situation, that's why Uddhava was asked to stay, because he had personal knowledge of the transcendental pastimes and transcendental situations of the Lord in both Vrindavan and in Dwarka. And therefore he became an ambassador of that knowledge to the sages who existed within the realm at that time, whether it is Badrinath or other places. So when the Lord explained his specific transcendental situation, it was meant for Uddhava only. Although the great sage Maitreya was also sitting there. Now, this is a very interesting scenario, because even the sage Maitreya was sitting there. He could not have understood what Uddhava understood. So it makes a very clear distinction of this knowledge. I mean, Maitreya was from the Jnana side. He was not as affectionate to Krishna, even though he had great respect for the Supreme Lord. He was not as affectionate reciprocally as Uddhava was to Krishna and Krishna was to Uddhava. But Maitreya was in a different situation. So he listened to everything. So let's hear this. So his dealings with devotees engaged. So he says, although the great sage Maitreya was also sitting there, such a transcendental situation is hardly understood by those whose devotion is mixed with speculative knowledge of fruitive activities. In the case of Maitreya, he was a Jnana Bhakta. So his devotion was Mishra, mixed with. His devotion was Mishra, that is mixed with Jnana. So they could not understand his perfect situation. The Lord's activities in confidential love are very rarely disclosed to the general devotees, who are attracted by devotion mixed with knowledge and mysticism. Such activities are the inconceivable pastimes of the Lord. So if you are mixed with knowledge, jnana, or mysticism, yoga, or fruitive activities, karma, which means that karma mishra bhakti, jnana mishra bhakti, and yoga mishra bhakti will not reveal confidential love and relationship of the Supreme Lord. It is later on, like for example, Dhruva, he later on became very pure because he carried on meditation on the Supreme Lord, and he was shaking and trembling and have all the symptoms of pure devotional service before he departed for Vaikuntha Dham. But initially, he was not purified, even though he became quickly a Mahabhagavat, because his approach to devotional service was from the point of Yoga Mishra Bhakti or Karma Mishra Bhakti. He wanted something from the Lord. And Yoga Mishra in the sense that he was practicing the yoga process to gain something. So such activities are the inconceivable pastimes of the Lord, which are the pure activities. Okay? So text 20.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Yes, sir.
Please, in that wise, comparing the Vidura to Maitreya. Now Vidura, Uddhava was asking the Vidura to go to Maitreya for enlightenment. But with what you have explained, if we could look, we see Vidura more a pure devotee than Maitreya. How is it that such an exalted devotee goes to one who is far above in devotion for enlightenment?
Well, his approach was like that, but because he got also, Maitreya also got the mercy of the Lord. because that was an arrangement of the Lord, that he appeared there and he listened to, the discussion within the Supreme Lord and Uddhava. He was definitely more purified. That's one, but his approach was from the Jnana Mishra angle. And the other reason is because of Maryada Vyatikrama. We will learn that later. Is because Maitreya, Uddhava was older, was like the father of Uddhava. It was not proper for Uddhava to instruct Vidura. It was actually Maryada Vyatikrama. It would have been a transgression of rules of proper etiquette, because a younger should not instruct an older. So therefore, that was the reason that he was asked to go to Maitreya. But Maitreya was also educated properly. He was a great soul. And you see, Maitreya Vidura Sambad is very long, goes through several chapters. So someone may, like the few four Kumaras, sons of Lord Brahma, they were also Jnana Bhaktas. They were in Jnana Mishra. And they made that mistakes at the gate of Vaikuntha. And in the purport, we will read later that had they been pure devotees, they would not have made that mistake of being angry and cursing the dear devotees of Vishnu, Jai and Vijay. But because we came from that angle. So it doesn't mean that they are not very advanced. Doesn't mean that. It means that they have less attainment of pure devotional service than persons like Uddhava or the gopis. But they can also become pure devotees and Mahabhagavad, just like the four Kumaras did. So it is a very difficult thing to reconcile it, because you don't have to think of it in terms of definitive, okay, because they are here, they are here. No. They can still advance to our platform, but they will still be a little bit less than personalities who are completely in pure devotional service and they approach from the pure angle. I also have that question in my teachers, and it's kind of difficult to reconcile the two. But okay. So I hope it answers your question.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Why is there so much flickering? The lights are flickering. So please don't flicker the lights. Sit quiet and don't have these things that's disturbing. So 20. Okay. I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, so Uddhava is considering that Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is his spiritual master. He personally instructed him. Just like we would consider Shukadeva Goswami to be the spiritual master of Parikshit Maharaj, he personally instructed him. So there was no initiation, but that was his spiritual master. And I think Krishna did not initiate Uddhava, but that was his spiritual master. So whether it is Diksha Shiksheti, Diksha or Shiksha is considered one and the same. Diksha means now we have an official start of the process of education of spiritual knowledge. So he said, I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from our spiritual master, the personality of Godhead. And thus, after circumambulating Krishna, circumambulating him, I have come to this place. So after he's finished and circumambulated and left Krishna, he's now come to this place by the side of Jamuna, where he's now meeting Vidura. Okay, so let's read this purport. Someone can read the purport?
Yes, I can try.
Yes, please. Yes.
Sri Uddhava's actual life is the direct symbol of the Chatusloki Bhagavatam, as enunciated first to Brahmaji by the personality of Godhead. These four very great and important verses from Srimad Bhagavatam are particularly taken out by the Mayavadi speculators who construe a different purport to suit their impersonal view of monism. Here, it is the proper answer to such unauthorized speculators. The verses of Srimad Bhagavatam are purely theistic science, understandable by the postgraduate student of Bhagavad Gita. The unauthorized dry speculators are offended at the lotus feet of the Lord, Sri Krishna, because they distort the purports of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to mislead the public and prepare a direct path to the hell known as Anda Tamisra, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 16:20. Such envious speculators are without knowledge and are surely condemned life after life. They unnecessarily take shelter of Sripad Sankaracharya, but he was not so drastic as to commit an offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. According to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sripad Sankaracharya preached the Mayavadi philosophy for a particular purpose. Such a philosophy was necessary to defeat the Buddhist philosophy of the non-existence of the spirit soul. But it was never meant for perpetual acceptance. It was an emergency. Thus, Lord Krishna was accepted by Sankaracharya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his commentation on Bhagavad Gita. Since he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, he did not dare write any commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam because that would have been a direct offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. But later speculators, in the name of Mayavada's philosophy, unnecessarily makes their commentary on the Chatusloki Bhagavatam without any bona fide intent.
So let me explain this part of this purport a little bit, make some comment on this. You see, the Chatushloki Srimad Bhagavatam, the way it is composed, is actually gives a lot of room for speculators to say that Krishna is impersonal, especially when he says Yathamanti Bhutani Bhuteshu Chachashvanu Pravishtani Apravishtani. I enter, but I don't enter. Tatha Teshu Na Teshu Ham. I am in this material creation, but I'm not in the material creation. And he says things like Tad Vidyada Atmano Mayam Yatha Bhasho Yatha Tamaha. Those kind of things. Mayavadi speculators will speculate on these things. But Prabhupada right in the beginning says, but Uddhava's actual life is a direct symbol of Chatushloki Bhagavatam. So when Chatushloki Bhagavatam is expanded fully into proper understanding of Bhagavatam from these 4 verses to the full manifestation of Srimad Bhagavatam, it reveals the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan and Dwarka. But the Mayavadis do not see this. Neither did Krishna, neither did Balaram, neither did Lord Brahma saw this. Up to the point when Brahma got the darshan of Lord Krishna in Gopavesh. Right? He got the darshan of Lord Krishna in Gopavesh as Gopal, as Govinda, in the Vesha of a cowherd boy. Then he could understand. But before that, he could not understand the full purport of the verses of Chatushloki either, because that actual meaning of just like Maitreya could not actually see the full purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, because understanding of the intimate pastimes and relationship of the Supreme Lord with his devotees. That is complete understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, if you follow the gist of this purport here. So since he was a great devotee, he did not dare write who. Then you see that Sankaracharya, he was a great devotee of the Lord because he's the incarnation of Lord Shiva. Tamal Krishna Prabhu, can you just put your phone on a something and stop flickering it? I have given these instructions, but no one seems to bother about it. If you're sitting in a place, then put the phone on a stand. So according to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, Sripad Shankaracharya preached the Mayavadi philosophy for a particular purpose. What was that philosophy? It was to defeat the Buddhists. But later on, Shankaracharya accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Krishna, right? And then he did not dare write any commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. So when we talk about the commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which is the impersonalist Mayavadi philosophy of commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shariraka Bhasya, that explanation is different. So there is commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which are also there, which gives a more monistic approach. But once Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra that is written by the author of Vedanta Sutra, which is Vyasadeva, therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary because the author who writes Vedanta Sutra writes a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. He knows why he wrote Vedanta Sutra. So he comments on it. So Srimad Bhagavatam becomes a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. That's the reason it is said natural, because the author, he wrote Vedanta Sutra. He knew the mindset. He knew why, how, and what is the reason he wrote Vedanta Sutra. So when he makes a commentary on it, it's a natural commentary. The others will make commentaries that doesn't reflect the heart, the mind, and the thought process of Vyasadeva. That's why Srimad Bhagavatam is considered natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra. The others aren't. Do you follow? So therefore, now once the Srimad Bhagavatam has been written as a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, Shankaracharya did not want to comment on the Chatushloki, nor on other aspects of Srimad Bhagavatam, out of respect for the Lord. But other nonsense Mayavadi philosophers, they will comment on it. That's what Prabhupada is saying. Is that clear?
Yeah. I have a question here.
Yes.
Yeah, because this Chatushloki, of course, like I said, I have not really gotten much detail, should I say, hearing on the Chatushloki verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam very deeply. Because I'm thinking back from the background from which I come from Muslim background. There are some specific verses in the Quran, and which probably maybe it is the foundation why the Islamic tradition consider God or the Supreme to be impersonal. Because exactly the same thing is there. The Lord is this, is not this. Is this, is not this. The Lord being and not being was also explained in the Quran very explicitly. And that is why the Sufi Muslims kind of accept the path of Bhakti very easily. Because when you go to the second level of Sufism, it reveals that behind the because it mentions something like what we call effulgence in Krishna consciousness. It explains that there is something behind the effulgence, but what is behind the effulgence is not explained there. So we don't know, but it explains that behind there is something behind the effulgence. So my question I'm trying to build up with this is that could we say, for the sake of this is Bhagavatam, but I'm thinking from a interfaith perspective in discussing with persons from other tradition, could we say that this monism, although we consider it to be offensive, is a stage of development in the path of spiritual life? Although it is offensive, but then could we explain it that, yes, it is offensive, but it is actually a level of advancement on the path of spirituality?
It depends. Impersonalism, yes. Mayavad, no. Impersonalism means accepting only that Lord doesn't have a form, but being ignorant of the fact that he has a form. Mayavad means denying him a form. So Shukadeva Goswami was a monist, and the four Kumaras were monists. They were situated in Brahman perfectly, purely, but they never denied the Lord having a form. So when they heard about the Lord having beautiful form and having beautiful character, they were attracted to him. But the impersonalist, the difference between the impersonalist and the Mayavadi categorically says the Lord cannot have a form, rather than not knowing that he has a form. It's two different things. I don't think it's so complicated.
Yeah. It's not complicated at this level. One would not see it that way. But when you look at someone coming from this Western tradition,
yes. So someone coming from the impersonal angle, I can understand that.
So because there's this famous verse in the Muslim Islamic would recite, meaning that God is not a person. He doesn't give birth to nobody. Nobody gives birth to him. He has no personality. So could we say this is Mayavadi?
This is impersonalism, not Mayavad.
Okay.
Because he is, and he isn't. Pravisthani apravisthani. Yadya vidyadatmano mayam yathabhaso chatushloki. Yes, he is impersonal too. Brahman is his feature. And in Brahman feature, because they do not accept the Lord as having a form, but they do see him as supreme, which is the first part of understanding of the absolute truth. Brahmeti. But they don't understand Paramatmeti. And they don't understand Bhagavaniti. They don't understand that. But if they just, stop and hold their mouth at the first point and accept that maybe there is, maybe there isn't, I don't know, then they will be impersonalist. And when there is information available that the Supreme Lord is a person and he can give and he can accept if he wants, then that will be personalism. That will be accepting the Lord as Bhagavan iti satyate. Yeah? We have to move on. So text 21. My dear Vidura, now I am mad for want of the pleasure of seeing him. So now he is fully aware of his separation of the Supreme Lord, and he is in a spiritual bhava, affliction of separation. And just to mitigate this, I am now proceeding to Badikashram. So he said, the best way I can mitigate my separation of the Lord is follow what he said to me. Very interesting. You can see it in so many different ways. That our separation of our spiritual master, because here the Lord is acting as spiritual master, because of the mood of separation we want to follow. Sometimes we do feel that my spiritual master is not here, but he told me something, I should do it, and I will feel his presence. So Vidura, being a pure devotee of the Lord, for want of seeing him, he said, I'd rather follow his instruction. He asked me to go to Ashram. And there I will have association, further association. And those association will give me more closeness to being with the Supreme Lord, feeling of closeness as being with the Lord, as I have been instructed by him, because he's been instructed by Krishna to go to Bhadrikashram for association. So he's wanting to mitigate this mood of separation by going to Bhadrikashram. Just like we can mitigate the mood of separation of the spiritual master, if that separation is intense indeed, by actually following his instructions, just like Vidura is doing here. So text 22. Yatra narayano devo narascha bhagavan rishi mridu vitram mridu tivrang tapo dirgam te pate lokabhavano. There in Bhadrikashram, the personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as a sages, Nar and Narayan, has been undergoing great penance since time immemorial for the welfare of all amiable living entities. Thus, in Bhadrikashram, the personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as a sages, Nar and Narayan, has been undergoing great penance since time immemorial for the welfare of all amiable. So he knows that Narayan Rishi is there, and he will feel the presence of his spiritual master Sri Krishna and the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, which is both for him, in the association of Narayan Rishi by doing penance, because they know that they are working for the welfare of all amiable living entities. Sometimes you feel that. I met my very dear God brother, Bhakti Prem Swami Maharaj, which I haven't met before. And he's a disciple of my Guru Maharaj, Srila Shripad Bhakti Choru Swami Maharaj. And every time I look at him and I meet him, I just jump in joy because I feel my spiritual master in him. And I meet him every day, like for the last 2-3 days. And I'm going to meet him again today. And we just burst in joy because it's just feeling like we're meeting my spiritual master. And that sentiment is so deep. And also because he was there and he listened to the whole seminar of my spiritual master, of Bhakti Churu Maharaj, who gave talks about Uddhava Gita, which was the last instructions that Uddhava is talking about that he received from Sri Krishna in Prabhasha under the banyan tree. And Bhakti Churu Maharaj gave seminars on Uddhava Gita before he left. That was his last big seminar, which he actually gave in India, and then he proceeded to New York. And then when he approached New York, he gave that talk. And after hearing that talk, Bhakti Jayapataka Maharaj was not very happy with that talk. And he said, he's saying something in that talk that I'm not happy with. And he could read the mind of Bhakti Churu Maharaj that he's gone there to prepare for his departure in America, which actually he departed under the pretense that he got COVID. But his separation with Srila Prabhupada was so intense because he had written a letter. I'm just narrating this because it's related to my understanding of this pastime of Uddhava. And he had written his separation, just like the separation of Uddhava and of Krishna. So he prepared to leave the world. So then I realized that the COVID and this thing was a pretense, because he had written that since the very first day, Srila Prabhupada, when you left, I was burning in mood of separation. But you asked me to stay, so I stayed and did what you asked me to do. Uddhava did the same thing. He stayed and did what he asked him to do. So he said, I stayed and I did. But he said, now all of your sons, some of your sons, you're calling them back. So why don't you call me back? He said, I cannot bear to be separate from you. So isn't that a very intense devotional parallel? Yeah? It's a very intense devotional parallel. It's very nice. So you can understand. So of my spiritual master to Krishna. And I like that. And I'm waiting for the right mind to read the Bhagavad Gita fully again. First listen to his class. So it's a nice thing to understand this. So yatra narayano devo narascha bhagavan rishi mriduti vram tapo dirgam tepate loka bhavano. Then Bhadrikashram, he said, we will have Narayana Rishi and the association. So Prabhupada in the purport, he talks about the 4 dhamma. Sometimes Hindu people, they say that the 4 tirtha, Gangotri, Yamunotri, Bhadranath and Rishikesh. But Rishikesh and Yamunotri and Gangotri, they are tirthastan. They're tirthas, they're places of pilgrimage, but they are not dhamma. Dhamma means where the Lord has performed pastimes. Bhadranath, Narayan Rishi has performed pastime, and Bhadranath came to prominence in Satyuga. Since the time of Satyuga, Narayan Rishis have been performing the pastimes there. And Dwarka came to prominence in Dwapar Yuga. Okay. And Rameshwaram came to prominence, the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra at the time of in the Yuga of Treta Yuga, right? And then Dwarkapuri becomes prominent in Kali Yuga as a dham, and Prabhupada is talking about it here. So these 4 dhams or kingdoms of God, which represent the planets of the spiritual sky, which consist of Brahmajyoti and Vaikunthas. They're Badrika Ashram, Rameshwaram, Jagannath Puri, and Dwarka. So faithful Hindus still visit these holy places for perfection of spiritual realization, following in the footsteps of devotees like Uddhava. So Badrika Ashram became prominent in Satyuga. Rameshwaram becomes prominent in Treta. Dwarka becomes prominent in Dwapar Yuga. That's interestingly, he says Jagannath Puri first. Jagannath Puri becomes prominent in Kali Yuga because of Lord Chaitanya stayed there. That's the reason too. So, so that's explained there. So we can move on to text 23. We want to finish this chapter today, but that will not be possible now. Spent a lot of time answering questions. So text 23. Shuka uvacha iti udavadupakarnyam suhidang dusahang vadang jnanena sayaman shakta shokam utpatitam buddha. So Shukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from Uddhava all about the annihilation of his friends and relatives, the learned Vidura pacified his overwhelming bereavement by dint of his transcendental knowledge. So he has heard about the passing of his relatives in Dwarka and the Moshara Leela and the dispatch of all the relatives of Sri Krishna was related also to Vidura. So then Vidura became, the learned Vidura pacified his overwhelming bereavement by using his transcendental knowledge, because he's been on pilgrimage as a Vanaprashti. So he is developing what we call Vairagya, detachment and knowledge, and purifying himself by his pilgrimage. So now, after hearing all about this, he's using his transcendental knowledge, like we all do, to be able to put ourselves together. Right? So what was that? The annihilation of the Kuru dynasty. And of course, the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. And also the passing away of the Lord. So this is explained here. All this hurled him into bereavement for the time being. But because he was highly advanced in transcendental knowledge, he was quite competent to pacify himself by enlightenment. Bereavement on account of the annihilation of the friends and relatives is not at all astonishing, because we all experience that in life. The talks between Uddhava and Vidura on the topic of Krishna began at sunset. And Vidura was now further advanced in knowledge due to his association with Uddhava. So they were talking, and then he became further advanced by association with Uddhava, because Uddhava was a pure devotee of the Lord. Vidura was also an advanced pure devotee of the Lord, but further advancement is always possible by association with more advanced souls. So Vidura was more advanced at this point after hearing from Uddhava. Is that okay? So text 24. Satam Mahabhagavatam Rajantam Kauravarshava Vishrambhad Abhyadhatedam Mukhyam Krishna Parigrahe. While Uddhava, the chief and most confidential among the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidura in affection and confidence questioned him. So he's saying, I'm on my way because I feel separation from my Lord. On my way following his order. Vidura was much older than Uddhava. Vidura was much older than Uddhava. Note this point. So by family relationship, Uddhava was a contemporary brother of Krishna, while Vidura was an elderly as Krishna's father Vasudeva. So there was a generational gap between them. But although junior by age, Uddhava was much advanced in devotional service to the Lord. And therefore, he's described herein as a chief amongst the demigod, devotees of the Lord. Vidura was confident about this, and thus he addressed Uddhava in that higher category. That is a way of courteous dealings between the two devotees. So even though he was confident that he would know more because he is an intimate devotee of Lord Krishna, Vidura was very happy to inquire, even though he was older. So that is a courteous dealing, Prabhupada is saying. There's so much in this pastime. So Vidura uvacha jnanam param swataraha prakasham yadaha yogeshwara ishwaraste vaktum bhavanyo Vaktum bhavano harati yadhi vishnor bhritya sabhrityartha kritas charanti. Vidura said, O Uddhava, because the servants of Vishnu, the Lord, wander in the interest of serving others, it is quite fit that you kindly describe the self-knowledge with which you have been enlightened by the Lord himself. So this is a Uddhava Gita talking about here. That self-knowledge by which this enlightenment has come about is actually the Uddhava Gita that's been taught by Krishna to Uddhava. And he says, now you're wondering, trying to serve others, because that's the duty of a devotee who knows this knowledge. He practices and preaches this principle of sharing, dadati pati grinati bhuyamakyati. He gives love to others by sharing this knowledge. Right? So he's asking now, please describe the self-knowledge which you have been enlightened by the Lord himself, who's acted as your spiritual master enlightening you. So please share this knowledge to me. So I will read the last part of this, last paragraph of this purport. Real transcendental knowledge descends in the disciplic succession from Lord to Uddhava, and Uddhava to Vidura, and so on. Thus, supreme transcendental knowledge is not possible to achieve by the process of imperfect speculation as performed by the so-called learned mundane wranglers. So this is a principle of parampara. Parampara means actually sitting down and learning, because the special dispensation sometimes kinds of worrying in ISKCON, because none of us really sit down and study this knowledge with our spiritual masters. That would be very rare to find someone sitting down and reading and studying under the care of a spiritual master. So we read, but we all study together under the care of Srila Prabhupada and his purports and his books, and by helping each other and learning from our seniors who has learned more from Srila Prabhupada and have more realization, then we kind of get the same result. But technically, Bhagavatam and Vedic literatures have to be studied by sitting under the shelter of your spiritual master. You know, maybe because of this worldwide movement, this special thing is there. But very few devotees have the express advantage of sitting under the care of the spiritual master and studying the books. Also, Vidura was anxious to know from Uddhava that confidential knowledge known as Paramam Sthitim, in which the Lord is known by his transcendental pastimes. So Lord is known through and by his transcendental pastimes, not just by the position of his transcendental nature. We can understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. Oh, he is Sachitananda Vigraha, he is the source of everything. He is both impersonal, and Paramatma and the Supreme Lord. But when we get to understand him through his lila, through his transcendental pastimes, that is a Paramam Sthitim, that is the highest understanding. So although Vidura was older than Uddhava, he was anxious to become a servant of Uddhava in the transcendental relationship, wanted to serve him and understand. This formula of transcendental disciplic succession is also taught by Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya advises that one receive transcendental knowledge from anyone, whether a Brahmana or a Shudra, or a householder or a sannyasi. Kiba vipra kibanyashi Shudra kenenai, say Krishna tattva, say Guru Hai, Lord Chaitanya says. Whether one is a Brahmana, whether it's a sannyasi, Kiba vipra kibanyasi, Shudra kenenai, whether it's a Shudra, or say Krishna Tattva Veda, one who knows the science of Krishna consciousness, he can be taken as a spiritual master. So provided that person is actually conversant with the science of Krishna, say Krishna Tattva Veda, say Guru Hai. So a person who knows the science of Krishna. So Prabhupada is paraphrasing this verse in Bengali here. Exactly that verse. Whether it's a Brahmana, a Shudra, householder, sannyasi, one who is conversant with the science of Krishna, he becomes Guru. So text 26. Uddhava uvacha nanu te tattva samradhya rishiko sharabok nite sakshad bhagavata adhishtu martya lokam jihasata. So Uddhava said, you may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya. This is the point now you ask that question. Now, Uddhava is saying to Vidura, and Prabhu asks the question, why did he send him to a person who may be considered lesser? Now here's a question. So you may take lessons from the great sage Maitreya, who is nearby and who is worshipable for reception of transcendental knowledge. Because he's nearby, Maitreya is also here, more or less, and he is worshipable for reception of worship, transcendental knowledge. And why he sent him? Because he said here, that answers your question, Prabhu, which I mentioned earlier, Rasavan. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this mortal world. So Maitreya was also there. So he received that knowledge as well. He received that knowledge as well. So even though he was a Jnana Mishra, but he became a pure devotee in a sense. He is a Mahabhagavat now because he received that knowledge from the Supreme Lord as well. You get that your question answered now?
Yeah.
Yes. So while he was about to quit the world, so he was also there. So how do we relate to that in our Krishna consciousness movement? We may have different devotees with different tendencies. Some may be more jnana, bhakta. Some may be more in puja. You may have a puja brahmana, and he may not be very knowledgeable. And you may have a person who is not so much into rites and ritual, but he has sentiments for Krishna, and he may also be very knowledgeable. Yes? Yes. No pongo here. No. Come bisogna avanzare? Domani? Come bisogna avanzare domani? Poi vai, godly. Okay. So you can also get that. You see, it's like, it's good to see this angle also. Uddhava is a pure devotee. Maitreya came from the angle of jnana. Others, may be more ritualistic and may have performed lots of ritualistic activities, and others may be inclined to, more yoga and siddhi and power. I don't know how is it in Africa. Sometimes I have a tendency to feel that some African devotees want to get power. They talk a lot about power. So they may come from the angle of yoga mishra, practicing seriously to become powerful. I've known devotees like that. And others practicing because they want this knowledge, and others practicing simply because They like deity worship. They like the ritual. They like this. So many things can also be there. So I'm not saying I'm categorizing anyone, but understanding this from Bhagavatam. Okay? Because the 5 angas of devotional service are there. Some may be more attracted to certain angas than others. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
We
Yes,
will may
Prabhu.
mature in our understanding of it as we go on. So let's read this purport. So he was, let me finish reading. So he was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this mortal world. So basically, Maitreya was also there, listening to Uddhava's questioning the Supreme Lord and getting answers through Uddhava Gita. Yes, Salika.
Yes, this principle of the junior not speaking with the senior and relating to our Krishna consciousness movement into this. There is a conversation sometimes back.
Can we read the purport first?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Although one may be well versed in the transcendental science, one should be careful about the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama, because it directly relates to that. Or impertinently surpassing a greater personality. So one may be well versed in the transcendental science, you may have jnana. One should be careful about the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama, or impertinently surpassing a greater personality. According to spiritual instruction, one should be very careful of transgressing the law of Maryada Vyatikrama, because by so doing, one loses his duration of life, his opulence, fame, piety, and the blessings of all the world. So Uddhava, he was young, younger than Vidura. And even though he was more intimately connected with the Supreme Lord, there's a rule. You may be more advanced, you may have rasa, you may have affection for the Supreme Lord, and you may be known to be incredibly more intimate with the Supreme Lord, but you still have to follow a certain rule, a certain code. You cannot, I'm a more advanced devotee, I have higher rasa, higher emotions and a higher affection, and obviously I'm more advanced, and therefore that was the position of Uddhava. But still, he said, I will be impertinent because this will be Maryada Vyatikrama, transgressing the law of Maryada. Thereby, because by so doing, one loses the duration of life, his opulence. So sometimes this is, let's read this carefully. To be well versed in the transcendental science necessitates awareness of the techniques of spiritual science. So the techniques means you have to follow a certain protocol, certain behavioral pattern, behavior, certain sadachar. 2 things. There may be sadachar and siddhachar, proper principle of putting things in action. So Uddhava, being well aware of all these technicalities of transcendental science, advised Vidura to approach Maitreya. So he was well aware of all technicalities, which also means siddha achar, what is right and wrong. Siddha achar. So Uddhava, being well aware of these technicalities, he advised Vidura to approach Maitreya Rishi to receive transcendental knowledge. Vidura wanted to accept Uddhava as his spiritual master, but Uddhava did not accept the post because Vidura was as old as Uddhava's father, and therefore Uddhava could not accept him as his disciple, especially when Maitreya was present nearby. So the rule is that in the presence of a higher personality, one should not be very eager to impart instruction, even if one is competent and well-versed. So the rule, and so Uddhava decided to send an elderly person like Vidura to Maitreya, another elderly person But he was well versed also because he was directly instructed by the Lord while he was about to quit this mortal world. Since both Uddhava and Maitreya were directly instructed by the Lord, both had the authority to become the spiritual master of Vidura or anyone else, but Maitreya being elderly. So in the case of both being equally instructed, even though they were equally being instructed by the Supreme Lord, Uddhava was still higher in terms of his intimate relationship with the Supreme Lord. So he was more advanced in understanding what was previously said to be in the verse that was in the Sanskrit term that was used. I forgot. Uttamam sthitim. The paramam sthitim. The paramam sthitim. It was explained the paramam sthitim, the highest position of the Supreme Lord. He was more advanced in understanding the paramam sthitim than Maitreya, even though both were instructed by the Lord. Uddhava was more adept at understanding the Lord's paramam sthitim. Do you follow the gist of it? Right, because that was explained. So the rule is that in the, okay, I just want. So since both Uddhava and Maitreya were instructed by the Lord, both had the authority to become spiritual master of Vidura or anyone else, but Maitreya being elderly had the first claim of becoming the spiritual master. Had the first claim. We have to read in between the lines, especially for Vidura, who was much older than Uddhava. One should not be eager to become a spiritual master cheaply for the sake of profit and fame. So I think we should be very careful when you are young. You know, as we get older, things become a little bit easier. One should not be eager to become a spiritual master cheaply for the sake of profit and fame, but should become a spiritual master only for the service of the Lord. The Lord, so Bhagavatam is so, it gives me solace to know that we have this knowledge available to us. Right? So the Lord never tolerates impertinence he never tolerates the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama, the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama. He does not tolerate that. So one should not pass over the honor due to an elderly spiritual master in the interest of one's own personal gain and fame. Are you there with me? All of you? Yeah. What happened to Jyoti Swarup Prabhu? He's joined some kind of Brahma Jyoti. The Lord never tolerates the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama. Is he there? Are you there?
Yeah, he said he's having a challenge with his network, so he requested that he should.
So one should never pass over the honor due to an elderly spiritual master in the interest of one's own personal gain and fame. Impertinence on the part of pseudo-spiritual master is very risky to progressive spiritual realization. I think this must have answered most of your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost. Oh, but I still have one practical aspect to clarify for my application.
Yes, go on.
Okay. In a practical application of Krishna consciousness and trying to avoid these offenses, sometimes you see, especially when you are in the midst of God brothers, and say a senior God brothers, they took to the path of devotional services before you. Probably maybe they are even a sannyasi or maybe even a guru, or maybe not. It doesn't really, but they're senior in terms of joining the devotional service. You were trained under the same spiritual master, and then you add same training from the spiritual master. But then there are certain things that are not right, and there's a need for kind of a correction, and or to explain certain things, to correct things. Does that relate to this? Because I'm asking this question from the background of the fact that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that if we are in, wherever we are, if there is no one who is a guru, then most people take the position of a guru and instruct. So in relation to this, and in dealing with God brothers, who sometimes there is a need for clarification of certain instructions, or something wrong is being presented. Just like, for an example, let me give a practical example from just what you said, we read just a few minutes ago. You were talking about parampara and what parampara means. But there was a whole lot of misconception about this at a point in time, and nobody was willing to talk. So I was compelled to speak that this is not what parampara means. Parampara doesn't mean this. So I'm starting to think, how do one relate this instruction, avoidance offenses, and acting in the practical terms when you're in the midst of a senior God brothers? I hope my question is clear.
Yes, I understand the question. It's been my query too. I personally would say that guidelines and practical techniques or technicalities of how to behave within God brothers, sometimes God brothers in different ashrams, and sometimes God brothers older, and sometimes God brothers in other managerial responsibilities within our society, we are completely in the dark. Because I sense it, you sense it. And everyone asks questions that from a Shastric angle, can anyone answer? I think no.
Okay.
Am I right? Am I saying the right?
I agree with you.
Think about it carefully, what I'm saying, taking my time to answer it. How does one relate to a younger devotee who's taken a sannyas? And if that person, and he's your god brother, and you're 20 years, he's senior, and you may even have more knowledge, or you may even be more advanced, but he may be in a different ashram. That's one thing. Then how do you relate to other persons who may be junior? They may have a higher position managerially in ISKCON, and they may even act as your authority, so to speak, in terms of practical responsibility of seva and service. I want to be able to sit and ask this question to some senior Vaishnavas, because I think the rules of these was not clear, and it has allowed a huge amount of offenses to be committed, which I have personally been witness to within the brotherhood of Srila Prabhupada disciples. And still to date, I think clear guidelines on this are not there, or understanding of this is not there. I personally believe it strongly, and I'm stating it, it's in video. So I'm not going to speak more on this, and I think it's not clear.
Thank you. Thank you. I can understand. Yes, sir. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
And it just can someone say how it should be? How it should be? What is a tradition? And what is the proper technical way to behave in this? I don't think it's clear, and I think this has to be sorted out. Some rules have to be applied so that everyone is comfortable according to Shastra.
Thank you.
Some research has to be done.
Thank you very much.
Traditionally, according to what is right, is Siddha Achar, right technical application of principles of Shastra in practical life in relationship to this. I'm sure some very intelligent and advanced devotees have thought or talked about it or may have written about it that I haven't come across.
Thank you. I'm satisfied.
Yes, thank you so much. So now I'm reading a text there. I have only a little bit left. I have to go to Rath Yatra. And yesterday I came back at 11 o'clock. There was a very nice program yesterday. And we had the Waterfront Festival in Mauritius, which is a 3-day festival. There's about 6-7 sannyasis on the island now. And yesterday GBC was there, Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj was there, Bhakti Anugrah Maharaj was there, and some other sannyasis were there. And I was the MC, Master of Ceremonies for the program. So I am particularly careful about what I'm saying today because I know I'm in that situation of knowing how to relate to, it's a very delicate thing when you have GBC and a Prabhupada disciple and a sannyasi and he's a guru, and then you have other sannyasis. How do you deal with them in this situation? And today we're going to have Giriraj Maharaj going to speak, and Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj is a GBC and sannyasi, also Prabhupada disciple. And then we have Damodar Maharaj going to be there, and then we're going to have other sannyasis going to be there. So they want me to be the MC. So I have to walk on eggshells and not make offenses. But because I'm fairly intimate with all the devotees, I know them, so everything can be easy.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, devotional service, I think my personal realization is that it's like a thing, and they want us to be, like in the word of my Guru Maharaj, he constantly used this word. He said, I want us to be attentiveness in devotional service. Every stage of devotion, I want us to be very attentive. I want us to be proactive, I want us to be attentive. A little inattentiveness could actually cause one a real big damage. I have practically experienced that, and I'm being a little bit more cautious now how I tread on the path of Bhakti. So I think I've seen here, I've seen there, and I'm trying to balance as much as possible.
Proactive. So the word proactive means don't be a separatist. Get involved, be part of the team, but be careful and cautious.
Be careful.
You will understand what is the meaning of separatist when we study 4th canto Daksha. He was a separatist. He had a separatist mood. So text 27, Srishuka Vacha. So Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidura the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc. on the bank of the Jamuna, Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. Again, the mood of devotional bhava or separation. He passed the night as if it were a moment. So they started late in the afternoon, and the whole night went talking about this pastime, between them. Remember, they started in the afternoon. Yeah? Just give me a minute. 1 minute, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, you are muted. I don't know whether you are still talking on the other side. You are muted.
Sorry, yeah. So the word here is used as for Vishwamurti, for Krishna. Both Uddhava and Vidura were in great affliction, so therefore they were in mode of separation and they wanted to see the Lord. So they kind of seeing the Lord everywhere, in a way. So Prabhupada is making this point. It's not that he's lost his personality by them seeing him everywhere, because he's described as Vishwamurti. Because of the mood of separation. They wanted to see him everywhere, so in their mind, they kind of seeing him in everywhere, or they want to see him everywhere. So text 28 is Rajo Vacha, so Parikshit Maharaj is questioning. The king inquired, at the end of the pastimes of the Lord of the free world, Sri Krishna, and after the disappearance of the members of the Vrishni and Bhoja dynasties, who were the host, who were the best of the great commanders? Why did Uddhava, who were the best of the great commanders, why did Uddhava alone remain? So Uddhava remain alone. So it's very incredible pastimes. I'm going to stop here. We only covered about, I think, 14 verses.
I think we can stop here. We can stop.
We can stop here. I'm also tired, and we'll just we'll rest for half an hour and then have to leave. So please read this. If anyone is serious here, will read these pastimes. I'm taking my time to narrate these pastimes as I've studied under the care of my teachers. So please read these pastimes very nicely and go deep into it. Listen to the classes, and there's so much in this. This is Uddhava narrating his personal, practical perspective of the Uddhava Gita to Vidura. Such incredible, sweet pastime. So we will finish this by next week. It's only we only left with
tomorrow. I say tomorrow going to be like, will you be able to make it? Because tomorrow is Sunday. I know they are maybe. Will you be
yes, fine. No, I don't want to miss my service. So tomorrow we will finish this. Yeah, I may. We'll start exactly the same time. Okay, and we'll finish. But please be on time and ask everybody to attend. And it's very deep knowledge here and very devotional. So we will complete from text 28, which is not a lot left now, to 36. But because now Parikshit Maharaj is asking, what was his role? What did he do? Then Shukadeva Goswami talks about it, right? And then Lord Krishna thought to himself, which means Uddhava is still narrating what Krishna will said to Uddhava, right? And then he qualifies Uddhava as not being inferior to me, almost the same as Krishna. So can you imagine, therefore, but many lessons we learned today, that Maitreya, spiritual master, but not all spiritual masters are on the same level also. There's difference in rasas, difference in understanding, and also difference in experience and age. All these things have been taught in a nice way. But we learn about Maryada Vyatikrama. And in terms of practical application, we are not in Vedic culture, because we come from so much, obstructed culture of materialism here. So we don't know about these dealings. And sometimes as we advance, by the mercy of Prabhupada and Krishna, we will learn more about these things. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for your time. We're very grateful. After Maharaj leaves, when Maharaj leaves out, I think you'll be a little bit free, maybe within the next week.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Maharaj is here already. Starting.
Dandar Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Mahaprabhu.